Hey everybody, it's Romania Black, and I don't know if it's because I just started this show and now it's just hitting my radar at once, but the Reagan thirst on Twitter is palpable. I'm like so floored. Like, we've been talking about it in the Discord. I've got some comments. I want to bring up some things. This may be a little bit longer of an intro than usual, but we need to go ahead and just put this out in the open. We need to talk about this because Reigen Arataka, he's not been present very much in the last couple episodes, but his presence is felt on social media. So lately in the Discord, we've been talking about Reigen Arataka and different things about him. And I want to go through a couple comments and then kind of share with you the highlights of the Discord from this week. But QL first and foremost pointed out that there was like a tiny little post-credit scene after episode 2. I'm glad you pointed out. It wasn't anything crazy, but I'm going to put some visuals up here for y'all to see for the next couple minutes when we talk about Reagan. But I laughed so hard. I wish I'd known about it. But the idea that there was a news special of the suspicious individual who tried to infiltrate an all-girls school, and it shows Reagan in the skirt running away. And I love on the TV it says, "Pervert appears at an all-girls school in broad daylight." I was like, oh my god, with his hairy legs. Like, it just goes, and I love that it cuts to Reagan. And he's just like airy on high alert and he's just sipping his tea. And then he gets flustered, not because of the whole news special about him being a pervert, but because the tea's too hot. Apparently Reagan does like hot things. He can't stand, he has a very sensitive tongue, doesn't like hot things. So apparently that's a thing. But I thought that was hilarious. So QL, I'm glad that you brought that out. But the whole Reagan thirst has been a big thing. So on the Discord we've been sharing, apparently, I didn't know this, but Six Yannings talked about, and I know I pronounced your name wrong on your handle, but talked about these body pillows of Reigen Arataka, and some of them are like standard body pillows. Like, you'd imagine you'd see the one with the suit or him in the yukata, but like the one with him in the sexy bathrobe with like the legs propped up, and then the one with him in the shirt unbuttoned. Why? Just why? And so then it all spiraled from there. I feel like the body pillows were a gateway drug into the Reigen Arataka thirst network that has taken over Twitter, because not even like a day later, it came out on Twitter that there was like a Twink Supreme poll on Twitter on September 1st, and he won. And so it was like, okay, that's great. Good for Reagan. He's our supreme twink. It's great. And then the fandom just kind of went with it. They just kind of went with it. They started like showing him in a Burger King crown, and I was instantly having like Attack on Titan flashbacks for that character. If you've watched my Attack on Titan reactions, you know who I'm talking about. And I was sitting there going, for Halloween's gonna fall, I think, on a Sunday or a Monday. Could I dress up as Reagan and have the Burger King crown on? Because I have one for Attack on Titan. Could I wear my Burger King crown and get a gray suit and a pink tie and be Reagan? Can I do that? So I might do that, but I was like, what? But like Twitter just went crazy, and now he's getting on like all the polls. He's winning all the polls, and it's just like it just out of nowhere. And the hilarious thing is, this is him in the manga. This is him in the webcomic. It's like someone said Reigen Arataka is not drawn well, he's not sexy, and then you have like manga Reagan going, and I took that personally. Like, it's the meme, it's the Michael Jordan meme where he's like, I took that personally. And then like, but just why? This man is the number one twink on Twitter. And it just went downhill from there. It went downhill from there. He was recently in like the top DILFs on Twitter poll, which is dads I'd like to fudge with, and and he won that, and he's not even a father. I mean, he is kind of like a father figure to Mob, sort of, but he doesn't have any actual children. Someone on the Discord, I think it was Kiri, was like, but he won the DILF poll, but there are actual dads in Mob Psycho that could have been on that poll. Nope. So he won that, and apparently he was in the same round as a character from Witch Hatlier, the Witch Academy Hatlier. It's a manga. I've been recommended it like so many times, and I'm reading too many manga right now, but one day I will read it, and apparently there's an anime coming out for it. One day I'll watch that anime. But apparently there's like two dads in that series. They're both like wizards, and one of them was in the same round as Reagan, and the Twitter fandom just made them a random crack BL couple. What? Like, why? And that wasn't the only image, though. That wasn't the image. Like, the fan base, like, was just going crazy. That wasn't the only image. There was also this one where people was just like seeing them look at each other across the room and then make out. I feel like every time I start Mob Psycho, I have to give an update on how the Reagan Arataka Twitter feed is going because I love this fandom. I love it so much. But yeah, the Reagan feed has been great. I just had to share all those with you because they've been amazing. But I do have a few really quick comments before we dive into episode 5. Robin Hood Productions made up a really good point here, and that's the idea that Reagan, he's a con artist, he's not a psychic, but at the same time, he actually does provide a service to the people that he serves. And Anna Chiron and Colt kind of latched onto this as well, or Colt latched onto this mainly, but the idea that he does provide a service. He still gave the guy a massage and helped him to help his stiff shoulder, even though there wasn't actually a spirit on there. And then he did take the photo and Photoshop it out, getting rid of the ghost, so at least it was a nice photo for them to have. So he is providing a service. He's just drastically overcharging for them for that service and saying that it's healing spiritual problems that aren't there. So I do think that's interesting that Reagan does help people. It's just kind of under the guise of being a sham, that's under the guise of helping people do the task they originally thought that they wanted to, but they actually needed something else. So there's that. So I thought that was interesting. I'm glad you pointed that out. Theo Probati noted that in the ED, and Anna Kyrian pointed this out as well, that the effects are actually watercolor on glass. That's how they get that cool, like, kind of fluid effect in the ED, and I think that's really cool. I like the idea of doing watercolor paint on glass. That's a really neat effect. It's different and unique, and I like it. So thank you for that. QL noted the after credit scene that I showed you all. Colt talked about the whole thing about Reagan and being the psychic stuff and everything, but also how I've been saying that Mob's family could be psychic, but Colt brings up a really good point. He's like, none of them fixed the spoons for Mob with their minds, so they're probably not psychics. So I kind of like that. I was thinking that Mob was like from a family of psychics, but I like the idea that his family is completely non-psychic and they're just accepting of Mob and they just love him. It's like the most wholesome family dynamic. I'm like, what is this actually good family that we see in an anime? What? Both parents are alive? They're supportive of their child? I feel like I'm in an alternate universe. Like, I feel like it's the most bizarre thing, but it's true, right? So I thought that was really, really cool. And then I also want to know that Mob, he kind of is sort of a reverse coming of age, because Colt pointed out that usually in a coming of age story, your main character has a special ability and they kind of align themselves with others that have special abilities as well. And they're like all, the cool kids. And it's all about, there's different dynamics that this show kind of alters or subverts or reverses. Where in this case, no, Mob's not surrounded by a bunch of psychics, even though he's just met Teru. But he's surrounded by like just regular normal people. And they all accept him for who he is. And so that's kind of cool. His main thing is he has trouble with social cues and getting the girl. And his whole mission, his whole MO is to try to get in the Body Improvement Club so he can get the girl. That's the whole thing. And that kind of ties into Anna Kyrian's comment. And this is my last comment. I know this has been a long intro. But she notes about how Mob having markers of autism. And I'm like, yeah, after reading Anna's comment on Patreon, really true. Yeah, Mob she talked about the idea that Mob has trouble picking up social cues, has trouble kind of following through. Like, Mob is self-aware. Mob knows that they have an issue with that, but they just don't know exactly how to fix the issue. They're like, it doesn't click, right? And so Anna had this really cool comment talking about their own experiences and talking about how Mob has these markers and how it's really cool that this series portrays a character that has markers of autism, but is treated as not only the hero, but also has such a great support network. Like, you have the Body Improvement Club with them, you have Reagan, you have, like, his brother. Like, there's all these people that are so supportive of Mob. And yeah, there's people that aren't, but there are people that are really supportive of him, and that's really cool. So I was like, that's awesome, yeah. And plus, like, I just want to protect Mob, because Mob is so pure and kind, and you just want to protect him, and you want to see him do really well. So I thought that was awesome. But yeah, I have talked enough, but I'm a Reagan truther. I've come to realize that horribly. I'm self-aware. I can attest to that. It's fine. But yeah, so I'm really excited to see what's going to happen. Teru versus Mob. Mob does not seem like he wants to use his powers at all, so what's that going to end up happening? I'm a little worried for our Bean. I am. But I'm like, Teru, dude, I'm curious if Teru knows about other psychics or if he thought he was like the only special one in existence. And Mob seems like he just takes it nonchalantly. He's like, nah, yeah, I get it. So we'll find out, right? But we're not going to waste any more time. We are going to dive into Mob Psycho episode 5. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Oh, I had to bring Whiteboard Coon out for this. Oh my god. This episode, this show gets better and better. And we are only 5 episodes in. And you give us an episode like this, 5 episodes in. We're not even to the halfway point. We're not even to the rule of 8. We're not even. And already you give us an episode like this? What? What? This may be one of my favorite episodes of anything I've watched. I don't know. I was like floored. I've watched several shows on this channel now, but this may be like in my top 10 episodes of anything I've watched. Just, it was that good. And we're only 5 episodes. It's the 5th episode. There's like usually, I wanted to bring Whiteboard Coon out for a number of reasons, but I am in for a treat with this show, aren't I? Aren't I? Because it is a lot deeper. It's going a lot deeper than I thought at the beginning of this. I thought the beginning of the show was just going to be this fun little romp with Mob and Reagan and their little misadventures. It's going to be all ha ha ha, funny, funny gags. No, we're getting into some serious shit. So, I wanted to bring out, this is Whiteboard Coon. If you've not watched my other reactions on this channel, I have not brought Whiteboard Coon out for a lot of shows, but good shows warrant it. And so I've had Whiteboard Coon out on Attack on Titan, on Neon Genesis, on all of my Heaven Official Blessings, those series, but I think that might have been the only ones I've used it for. A couple of BL series I've used it for as well, but Whiteboard Coon comes out when there's a special reason, and this episode is a special reason. It helps me explain all things. And so I want to bring Whiteboard Coon out because we have 12 episodes in this season, in this first season, right? I'm going to get it to where y'all can read this. So there's 12 episodes, and then we do what we call a 3-act structure. Your 3-act structure in literature, it does a lot of things. You have your first act, which introduces your characters, right? So it's the intro of the cast. All of your main players. So we have Reagan, we have Ritsu, we have Mob, we have Sabomi, we have Teru, we had Dimple. I don't know. I don't want to think Dimple's gone. I feel like Dimple was not just going to come around for 2 episodes and that's going to be it. So I feel like he's still there, but he's vanished. Maybe he'll come back. But usually you have your first act, which is your intro of your cast, and you set up the dilemma, right? You set up that there is a dilemma in the series. And then your second act is usually where your conflict gets in motion. Whatever the action is that's happening, whatever your conflict is, that gets put into motion in the second act, right? And then usually characters by the end of the second act will get to their lowest point. Or you reach an important twist. Let's put it that way. There's an important twist that happens that leads you into the third act. And the third act builds to the climax. And then you have resolution. And if it is a multi-season series, then you'll have kind of a hook to the next story. And that's your 3-act structure. So in a 12-episode series, what I like to do is that you'll have basically, you do 4 episodes. So episodes 1 through 4 is your first act. Which Mob Psycho's done pretty good with the 3-act structure for the first 4 episodes. We've introduced all of our characters, our main ones, the main ones that are important. I'm sure there'll be others that come along the way. But you have Ritsu, you have Teru, you have the Body Improvement Club, you've got the Telepathy Club, you've got Mob, Reagan, you have Dimple, you've got Sabomi, you have Masato, you have your main cast of characters. They have all been introduced, and we've set up this dilemma. The dilemma is getting explored more in this second act, which is going to be episodes 5, 6, 7, and 8. Episodes 5 to 8. And when we get to episode 8, we'll talk about the Rule of 8, because the Rule of 8 is like a special episode. It turns into the third act, right? The 8th episode's usually a really good one because it's leading you into that third act. And the third act is going to be your episodes 9 through 12. Okay. So this dilemma that's being set up and gets explored in this episode is the dilemma of having multiple psychics or multiple espers. So the fact that Teru is an esper just like Mob, that goes in like 90 directions in this episode. It's kind of amazing. But also what gets explored in this episode is the idea of Mob's powers and the dilemma with that. The dilemma is Mob does not want to use his psychic powers because it causes him to erupt and because he's afraid he's going to hurt people. And he's been told by his mentor, Reagan, that you're not supposed to use your powers to hurt people. And he's seen how bad that is through this flashback we get of him and Ritsu. So yeah, so we're setting up that Mob's powers are a focus of this series. They're a focus of the dilemma. Ritsu seems to think that there's something else going on with Mob's powers. He almost gets like possessed by another spirit because he said at the very end, he's like, that's not Nissan. That psychic, that being that he becomes is not his brother. So interesting. But yeah, that is a 3-act structure. It's usually most literature. I like applying it to a 12-episode series of an anime because it's pretty easy to follow in a 12-episode series. Or in a cour. You could even do like if you have a 24-episode season, split into 2 cours. Usually you go through the 3-act structures twice. And except usually the second cour you don't have as many new characters, but you have other ones. So yeah, so that's that. So I'm going to get rid of that because we got a lot to talk about. But I wanted to bring that out and just talk about it first. So we're entering the second act and getting to know Teru more. God, this episode, it went 1,000 different places. I didn't think it would go. It did so many things with the tropes. And then we established Mob and not only his character, but his resolve, his dilemma, and Teru by the end of this. Maybe Mob and Teru will become friends by the end of this because Teru just witnessed how insane Mob is. So many things subverted in this episode. I was like, we've got to go through it all. It's kind of amazing. Actually, this episode's kind of amazing. So I want to say first and foremost that you have Mob and you have Teru. Teru it's so hilarious because I was trying to watch this episode through Teru's perspective. And in Teru's perspective, he believes he's the main character. And so if you were watching this show and Teru was the main character, Mob would seem like that kind of chill villain that just like comes in and has all these powers. He's like, you're psychic too? And he's like, you must be my enemy. And Mob's like, no. It's great. So we have Teru. All right, we have Teru and we have Mob. And so I love that Teru did not know about other espers, right? He did not know about other psychics other than himself. But Mob has seemed aware of psychics. He seems aware. The funny thing is, I'm sure that the first notion that he became aware there were other psychics was meeting Reagan, which is the irony of all ironies because Reagan's not a psychic. But he's convinced Mob that he is. And he's been so kind to Mob and so nice. Mob's like, well, why would you lie to me? So he believes Reagan. So Mob being aware of psychics around him, I mean, he's also been exorcising ghosts for like how many years? We don't know. They do the flashback and it shows Mob very young. So Mob has been around Reagan for a very long time. So it makes sense that Mob being used to spirits, thinking that Reagan is another psychic, the idea that Teru is a psychic is not surprising to him. He's like, oh yeah, you're like me. Okay. But to Teru, he didn't know about other espers or ghosts. So he was like, this is all foreign to him. And he's like, I guess there are espers other than you, Shigeo. Or than Dimple-sama. And so I just love how surprised, everything Teru does at the beginning of this episode is like a damn shonen protagonist. He's like, are you a natural? So he calls espers naturals, right? Which is kind of cool. It's like building this inner lore that there's like espers and naturals. That's like, he's got his own lingo for it, like a damn shonen protagonist. Like he's been told by a mentor, which I'm curious. I wonder how, if he has a mentor like Reagan, or if he found out about his psychic powers and just rolled with it and he's just been acting freelance this whole time. I don't know. And he's like, what's that creepy looking ball of energy next to you? So he doesn't even know what Dimple is. He doesn't know that Dimple's a spirit. He just thinks he's a ball of energy. And I love that he calls him creepy and Dimple gets offended. And he's like, are you its master? And Mob's like, no, it's haunting me. But Mob does have, he did find Dimple tolerable. Like, they weren't exactly friends, but he tolerated Dimple, and he kind of felt sad when he was supposedly erased. I don't think he's gone. I think he's just conveniently, like, pieced out for the moment. And he's like, whatever. And the animation. But this part here, there are a bunch of questions I want to ask you, but we need to establish something. That's, like, just such a shonen protagonist thing. Like, I can just picture Ichigo being like, I want to ask you a bunch of questions, but first we need a battle. Like, that's just, like, your stereotypical shonen, what else would you expect, right? And so he talks about establishing the hierarchy, and Mob's like, say what? And we get Mob's progress towards explosion 47%. Mob's like, what? Amazing. So then we have the OP, which is beautiful in itself. I'm so curious. But yeah, everybody's knocked out. And so Dimple's trying to tell him, he's like, you need to be careful. And the animation in this episode is so good. The animation did not have to go this. Bones, what are you doing? If there's ever a time I want to be a fly on the wall in Bones Studio, it's for this episode. Because they just went balls to the walls insane with the animation. Like, I would have, like, the people that storyboarded this out, I would have wanted to be there and see them storyboard it and, like, everything. It's so good. It's so good. And I love that Dimple's like, he like looks over as like Teru takes Mob off. He's like, oh shit, what am I gonna do? Like, this guy's insane. But Mob's not affected. He's just like, sorry, I wasn't listening. What'd you say? Mob is so strong and so good at defending himself that Teru's attacks do nothing. They don't harm him at all. And he's like, what? And he's like, why are you attacking me? I haven't done anything. So here's the thing. We talk about the markers with Mob, and now it's like, it's there that you're like, yeah. But Mob is like, why are you fighting me? I haven't done anything. Like, he's just calling Teru out. Like, what are you doing? Why are you being, what's up with this bullshit? And he wants Teru to be his friend. He's like, let's be friends. And Teru like backs off like a cat getting a bath. He gets so far away. But Mob is not threatened, and he's such a kind-hearted being that he just wants to be friends. He wants to be friends. And Teru is closed off and afraid. He's afraid of trusting Mob. And Mob kind of explains why. Oh, God, we'll talk about that scene. That was absolutely amazing. But yeah, he's like, let's be friends. And instead, and Mob's just like, and the sad thing is that Mob struggles with social cues, but Mob is doing the right thing in this moment. Mob is doing everything right. He's like, I don't understand why you're being this way. Let's just be friends. Teru's the one being a weirdo. Teru's the one that's like, this guy's trying to be friends with you. He's not fighting you. Get a clue. Teru's the one that should get a clue, right? Mob is trying to be kind, and Teru just won't listen. And Dimple explains it to Mob, saying he's on guard. And Mob's just like, did I do something wrong? I want to, like, protect this small bean. The protection squad vibes with Mob is amazing. And so Dimple kind of relates to Teru. He's like, it's not that I don't understand how he feels. He's lived his life as a big fish in a very small pond. So I love the idea of the big fish in the small pond. Yeah, Teru has been living his life at the top of the food chain because of his psychic powers, and now that he's met someone that's on the same level as him or above him, it's like knocked him down some pegs, and he's having to like emotionally deal with that. But he's just like using this telekinesis to like go over all around Mob, and he says he's meeting someone that could be his natural enemy and trying to establish superiority. He won't be satisfied unless that's the case. And I love that in this episode, when characters are like having these deep monologues, they suddenly break from the monologue and they're like, but wait, what's happening? Like that's so good. Like Dimple goes on this big like monologue to himself, and then he's like, but that aside, what's with all this weird movements? I love that he just breaks thought to get Mob to answer him. And Mob knows what it is. He's like, oh, it's telekinesis. You can move around objects and stuff. And he's like, you're not going to do it? And he says, I get nauseous, so no. So, telekinesis. Mob knows how to use it. Telekinesis makes him nauseous. Which is such like a fun little thing. It's like, no, I would use it, but it makes me sick, so I don't really want to. He's like, nope, not gonna do it. And he's like, oh, and I love Dimple's reaction. He's like, oh, well. He's like, what can we do? And meanwhile, while Mob's just sitting there telling Dimple something, he's like, yeah, there's something going on. I don't know. It makes me sick. I don't want to do it. While he's doing that, Teru is having this like 4D chess game in his head. Having like a light Yagami chess game in his head where he's like, if I use telekinesis to teleport close to my enemy and blow him away with my Psycho Fist, like he's going through all the motions. He's like, this dancing strategy I perfected to use against average people. And it shows like his arms and everything flailing. He's having this big giant moment. And he's like, no, they look like nothing more than weird movements against him. And Mob doesn't even care. It's like, oh my God. And he's like, damn it. And Dimple's like, Shigeo, you need to teach him a lesson and show him who's boss. And Shigeo, he's like, look at how he's standing. He's going to attack again. And the way that he's standing, like with all the, it's not the rocks and stuff floating around him and the weird thing. It's just like his knees are bent weird and his butt sticking out. I'm like, why did they animate it like this? Why? And Teru in this episode, oh my God. You need to hit him with something big. And he's like, no. You're not supposed to use psychic powers against people. And I like that Dimple gets frustrated. He's like, look who you're talking to. This is not an ordinary person. He has psychic powers like you. He's like, he's put his psychic powers to good use and is living a fulfilling life. And Mom's like, no, he's not. He's like, and then Dimple says, look at you. You're living a dull lifestyle with one boring day after another. And meanwhile, Mom just like ricochets all the attacks off of him. Don't you think there's anything appealing about you without psychic powers? And then that's when we get the Reagan monologue. So Dimple's like, he says to Dimple, you're dull without those powers. But Mob's like, he doesn't believe that he's dull. We'll get to the point of why Mob doesn't want to use the powers. But then we get what Reagan tells him. So we get Reagan over here. Am I going to end up loving Reagan? I gave Reagan so much shit at the start of this series, but the more this series goes on, we're only in episode 5, but the more it goes on, the more I'm like, Reagan, you're actually maybe brilliant. What? He says, we were born with special powers that others don't have. And he tells Mob that we mustn't let it get to our heads and think we're special. And so he tells Mob that we're special, but we shouldn't have an ego. Which is hilarious because at the root of all of this, it's funny because on the surface it seems like he's telling Mob all this so that Mob won't go off and do his own thing so he can use Mob to his own ends. But it's actually like some of the best advice he's ever given him. And he tells little Mob this. And he says, people who are fast, people who sing well, people who are book smart, who are good at talking, and people who can use psychic powers. You can't put one over the other. He says, all of our talents are equal. He's like, everybody can do something great, and there's no one ability that's greater than the other. And I love that when he sees Reagan, it's like there's this energy in his mind. He says, being confident about your powers is fine, but you mustn't get conceited. So confidence, I love that. Confidence is not equal to conceit. He's like, you can't be conceited about it. You can be confident, just don't get conceited. Don't get too much ego, right? Because the way he describes it, he says, depending on how we use our powers, they can be deadly weapons. They're just like knives. What are you not supposed to do with knives? And he says, point them at people. That's so sweet. Like Reagan giving him this advice. And I love that we phrase it like we all knew it was Reagan. Like surely the audience all knew it was Reagan from the start. But I love that, and I could tell from the voice actor, you could hear his Reagan's voice actor in this scene, but they frame it like it's this wise sage, this amazing sensei, and then they cut up. He's like, don't forget it. So you do get it. Never forget. And he's like, that's the moral code for people like us with special powers to live by. And Dimple-san was like, it gets ruined once you find out that Reagan's saying it, because Dimple knows he's a sham. But he won't tell Mob that. So, no, that's amazing. I'm like, Reagan Arataka coming in clutch with the sound sage advice. What the heck? That was really, really sweet. I love that. I really love that. And he's like, anyway, I won't use them in a fight. And I don't want to live a life that having to rely on psychic powers. Because he's seen what it does. To Mob, he's like, if you rely on your psychic powers, if you rely on them, then they will become all that you are. We'll talk about that and its connection to another series that I just finished. We'll talk about that. But he's like, I don't want to rely on them. He's like, I'm going to find some other potential within me. And not to mention, I started working out. Like, again, they just have to tie that in. He's like, I'm going to change. And at the time, we don't really understand what he means by going to change. We're like, what's he talking about? But he says, I'm going to change. He wants to rely on other potential. So the funny thing is that the Body Improvement Club, it's not entirely just to get Tsubomi, but it's to help him to change his own potential and what he's good at. And so he can rely on something other than his psychic abilities, because he's seen that his psychic powers have hurt people. He's seen it hurt people, including his brother. And he's like, I don't want to do that again. He's like, I want to change and be different. And it's like, oh, but you don't, at the beginning of this episode, you don't quite realize that. You're like, okay, well, what's going on? And Dimple's like, well, you say that, but, and then we just have this onslaught, and I was really, really worried. And meanwhile, while Shigeo is having this existential moment and explaining this giant philosophical discussion with Dimple, you have Teru, who's been plotting these shonen type attacks, like his telekinetic tackle, that he's been like trying to like get up on Mob. And it's like, Mob doesn't care, man. And he's like, a life without psychic powers. And he's like, how stupid. There's no reason to live your life stooping the level of average people. The animation just goes balls to the walls in this. He's like, other potentials are useless. Like, he's just Teru. The animation on him, it's so feral and so raw. And I'm like, what the fudge? It's so good. But this episode, I was really worried about Mob for all. I'm like, how is he not... but then you see that he has that barrier. So when he goes underwater, you can see the barrier around him. That makes sense. It's like, okay, Mob has the barrier around him. He's been using it this whole time to keep him from getting hurt. Right. That all makes sense. Because I was like, how is he not getting hurt? And I love that he slings him around with his psychic abilities and Teru's hair like flips with it. It's so good. But damn. But yeah, he's been protecting himself with the psychic powers. He's like, brain, brawn, even the law are powerless. And Dimple's like, ugh. I'm kind of with Dimple. He's like, this kid won't defend himself, but the other kid's kind of annoying. I'm special and the world revolves around me. So he's like, brain and brawn and the law are nothing to his powers. And he says that the world revolves around Teru. Teru gets a reality check in like the span of an episode and a half. I was like, what the fudge show? And he's like, I guess there's no choice. And Dimple's like, he's like, can we just call this a draw? He's like, I can see this is not going to work, so let's just stop this. And he's like, not happening. And he's like, it would be the biggest disgrace of my life. I love how he's drawn it so like serious. And Dimple's like, you can't break Shigeo. He's not going to defend himself. Like, look at him. Our poor little bean! No! And so Dimple, I'm glad Dimple can temporarily become, like, he can become, like, back to his former self as the ghost. And so, but he just, like, cuts it. And I love how Teru looks not impressed at all. Teru's like, you're nothing, and just through it. But then poor Mob. Mob gets so sad about that. Mob's like, no, Dimple! And he's like, and the moment he said Shigeo's a man who can become a god, which is so true, right? Which is what's terrifying, is that Dimple has seen the power that he has, And he's like, he's strong enough to like surpass so many others and do all this damage. And he's like, he's not a second-rate loser. The moment he said second-rate loser, I'm like, oh, well, he's going to like cut right through you. And he does. And then I love that Mom's like, oh. And then she says, Dimple! And because Teru's just like, I just got rid of him. And he says, I erased him with my psycho wave. Like, he has attack names and everything. What a shonen protagonist. And from the core, there wouldn't be a single shred left. Like, you didn't even know what he was 10 minutes ago. You just called him a ball of energy. And then I love that Mob goes on this little thing about Dimple being exercised. And he's like, the process to his explosion, 50%. But I love that he, like, goes through all of the terrible advice that Dimple gave him. And, like, talked about Tsubomi-chan's ass. Like, why? And then, like, I do love that he flips off Reagan. I love that he did, like, the finger to Reagan and was like, I'm going to send your master to the hospital for calling him a ladybug. That part's amazing. Like, probably Dimple's best moment. But yeah, and he's like, I'll make you popular. And then, like poor Mob, like, sweating. And he's like, want me to show you how to use X-ray vision? And he's like, I don't know either, you perv. Like, Dimple was the worst. And then he's like, just for a sec, would you like me to take over your body? Like, try, like, that, it's like, you see a montage of when a character dies, and it's all, like, the great moments that you had with that character, but all of Dimple's moments are terrible, and then even, it, like, all builds up to the moment he's like, would you let me possess you? And at that point, Mob's like, oh, Dimple, huh? And he's like, what, are you shocked your pet was erased? And he's like, oh, not really. I love that you think it's gonna be this heartfelt death of a character, but Mom's like, no, it wasn't actually that good. It's great. And the Mom's progression towards the explosion doesn't go up at all. It just stays at 50%. Those kind of subversions are what I love about this series and why this episode is chef's kiss. It's so freaking good. But in any case, I love that Teru's like, well, it was a pointless existence to begin with. And that goes for you too. And Mob's like, he called him a third-rate nothing but a small fry. And then that's when Mob remembers all of the good things that Dimple said to him. So for Mob, he realizes that Dimple was annoying, but he did try at times to support Mob. So Mob can't completely hate him or be totally indifferent to him because he did help him like feel a little bit better. And so when he tells him that he's a small fry and third rate, he remembers the good things that Dimple said to him. And then as Teru's like spouting off all this stuff about, you know, people being third rate and being awful, Mob hears this stuff about become more confident, Shigeo. You're the main character after all, right? And he's like, what's that look? And he's like, why are you looking at me like that? And Mob says, well, why do you have to belittle others by calling them average or small fry? He's like, huh? He's like, I just realized that guy might have been okay. That's all. Like, he's like, you're making fun of this guy, but he was just an average, decent person. Why you gotta do that? And Teru's like, oh, and he says, compared to you. And so I love it. And then as the thunder claps and the lightning flashes, it's great. And I love that Teru calls him being smug. And the animation around him, they make him look so crazed. Like in this second half, they make him look absolutely crazed and manic. And it's like, he calls Mob smug. And I'm like, Mob is not smug at all. And he's like, I'll make you to submit to me with my psychic powers. Oh my God. And he's like going to come at him at full power. And he says, that's dangerous. If it wasn't me, you could hurt someone. Stop that. Like, Mob tries to warn him. Like, Teru was so overconfident. It's like, Mob warned you to stop, like, from the start. And you just didn't do it. He's like, quit underestimating my powers. The moment he was talking and yelling about underestimating his powers, he sounded like Bakugo from My Hero Academia. But I need to go relook up. I know that somebody commented who his voice actor is. I need to go look up who Teru's voice actor is. I need to go find that. But it sounded like Bakugo. I was like, really? It's great. But yeah, he just attacks poor Mob. And like, Mob doesn't even fight back. Also, they do a lot of collateral damage to this school. This school was like, I was wondering how they were going to get out of this. Because I was like, how are they going to get out of the fact that the school was absolutely wrecked? Like, it was completely destroyed. how are they going to rectify this? Because that would have been noticed enough. But then we find out that when Mob reaches 100% and has sadness, that he puts it all back together, trying to like rectify what happened. So there's that. But I thought that was interesting. I was wondering what they were going to do. But it's just hilarious because Teru's acting like Vegeta from Dragon Ball Z, like trying to fight Goku and just like ripping through him. And it's like as if Goku decided to become pacifist and was like, nah, I don't want to fight anymore. It's great. Like the amount of damage this episode causes is absolutely insane. And Mob says to stop. And he just won't stop. Teru wants him to show him his powers. And he gets to the point where he like tries to like just push his boundaries to the point where he can't resist. And Mob's like, I'm not going to do it. He's like trying to do the endurance thing. When he takes out the knives, again, we had the whole conversation of the knives. What do you not do with knives? You don't point them at people. And Mob's like, they're dangerous. You shouldn't point them. I like that Mob has to tell him because Mob's like, he's like, those are dangerous. Put those away. You're going to cause an accident. Like Mob's trying to warn him like this could end badly. And then, but he doesn't listen. He thinks, like he foolishly thinks, he's like, I'm not going to try to kill him. I'm just going to get him riled up and then he'll deflect the knives and then he'll fight me. He deflects them and one of the knives that gets deflected like knocks off his hair. He's like, I think it's important to know that Teru at this point, Teru has no intent to kill. He says that. He has no intent to kill. He just wants to rile Mob up so that he'll show off his powers and they can fight each other and see who's like top dog. But he doesn't have any intent to kill Mob or to really hurt him. But Mob just doesn't want to fight back. And then Mob realizes he's like, oh, an accident. And oh, the poor Mob, he's really sad. Like I thought maybe he like got cut or something. He's like, oh no, an accident. But no. He's like, I'm going to kill you. And I just love the dramatic lighting. And his teeth are all messed up. So I want to look up real quick. I want to look up, what is an Ochimusha? What is an Ochimusha? I feel like I should know what this is. What is this? Oh, okay. Is a defeated warrior that fled the enemy. They're considered a low-class citizen, no longer at the level of samurai. It's said that to escape safely, they hid in the mountain villages. Oh, and so part of it is that they chop their hair off, right? At the top, right? They've chopped, usually isn't like a top knot or something, they chop them off. Oh my God. Okay, that all makes sense now. So of course Teru would be, I love the top of Teru's head, 0%. That's a great gag. That gag's amazing. But yeah, so I love, okay, and so then we have the hands in this form like a little prayer thing. So maybe that's supposed to be sadness. I don't know. Interesting. But I love that makes sense because that makes him like a defeated samurai, right? He's like, you'll pay for this. I won't forgive you even if you apologize. But by the end of this, he realizes the errors of his way. And I like that he takes the tie off and he makes it like a Kuwabara spirit sword. What? Oh my God. It's so, like his face, he gets so much more animated, Teru does. Like he just gets worse and worse. Like just, and then what is with it reminded me of SpongeBob. I wonder if SpongeBob was, I feel like SpongeBob came out way before this series, but I feel like it was maybe the animators were maybe inspired by it or whatever it was inspired by. There's an episode of SpongeBob where Squidward's face gets super overly dramatic and it's like painted like to the fullest extent. And it's like dramatic like this, but it came out way before this, but I know it's based off something else. Like SpongeBob didn't come up with it. They based it off another art style or another series. But him being like, you thought I looked like an Ochimusha just now, didn't you? And he's like, you did, didn't you? And it's like so dramatic. What? With this series, Bones would have been so much fun to watch during this. There's just no way. And he's like, I didn't say that. And he's like, so you did think it. Oh my God, it's amazing. He's like, that's fine. I'll admit it. This shameful sight, the truth. He's like, and I'll acknowledge you too. And he's like, I didn't do anything. He's like, what's your name? And he's like, Kageyama. And so he's like, introducing, he's like, fine, I'm Hanazawa Teruki. And he's like, oh, Hanazawa-kun. Nice to meet you. Mob, regardless of everything that's happened, is still a sweet cinnamon bean. And he's like, no, not as a friend. I acknowledge you as an enemy. It's amazing. So he just goes all out with the sword, just destroying everything, trying to get Mob to show off his powers. And he's like, I want you to stop. And it's just, God, it's amazing. The animation, the action, the fluidity, everything about this. And Mob is starting to get a little annoyed because he's like trying to hold up that energy. And he's like, I'm popular. I'm the main character of the world. Everything, when he says everything revolves around me and the sweat beads come off of it and he like does this thing where the camera goes around. What the fudge? And he's like, I'm Tanizaka Teruki, the chosen one. And he's just so drunk on his own ability. And Mob's like, how can you be so confident in yourself? Like, how? And he's like, and he says it's a stupid question. And if you notice, all of his attacks have gone around Mob, right? Which Mob's defended himself, but I wonder if he was not really truly aiming at him, just trying to get him riled up like he was with the knives to get him to fight back. And he says it's because I have psychic powers that I'm confident. The power to control everything. And you're my first enemy. And Mob's like, but you're just a normal person. And he says, no. And I like that Teru's like, you can fight me. I'm not going to get hurt. And he's like, I don't want to injure you badly. Which he knows that he would, right? He's seen what his powers have done before. And I like that Teru tries to laugh it off and call it a joke. And saying, don't compare me to average people. And he's like, but you are average. He's like, I'm on a different level as those living creatures. And he's like, being able to use psychic powers isn't that. You're going a bit overboard. I love that Mob's like, you're doing a bit too much. You're the only person who can make that argument. That's why you're an eyesore. And so the Mob says, oh, and here's the part where the episode gets absolutely amazing, is that Mob realizes, he's like, oh, he's like, why are you going so overboard? He's like, why are you being antagonistic towards me? And Mob's deal is that he has trouble reading people. He doesn't know how to read the mood. And he's like, why are you being this way? And then the light bulb comes on. But the thing of it is, the thing that I love about Mob's character, and this kind of ties to Anna's comment about the markers, is that, you know, other characters in other series would have that big, like, aha moment where they're like, oh, I figured it out. Mob's like, oh, I just realized what it is. Like, it's just as if it just comes to him. Like, as if it just comes to him. And he's like, oh, I get why you have this animosity towards me. He's like, I understand what it is. It just, like, clicks. It clicks all of a sudden. And he's like, you don't like me because we're the same. It's like, yes, hit the nail on the head. He's like, not the fact that we both have psychic powers. That's not it. But the fact that you have no confidence in yourself, just like me. Take away your psychic powers, and there's nothing left. And so Mob says that he says that we're the same because without psychic powers, there's nothing left. We don't have anything of our own, which is why Mob told Dimple, he's like, I don't want to use my psychic powers. I want to find another way. I want myself to be more than my psychic powers. I don't want to have to rely on them because I don't want them to become who I am. I want to be Mob, be Shigeo Kageyama, and have my own abilities that are outside of those psychic powers so I can be something. And just, I love the animation when he tells Teru this. And him just telling him, says, you'll be empty. You're scared of that realization. And as it zooms in on, it's so abstract and wonderful, but as they zoom in on the hairs on his heads, they all become little mobs. All of the strands of hairs, he's like, no friends, no standing out. And all the little strands of hairs are little mobs. Just another average loser who won't leave a mark. That's me. I'm like, no, Mob, you're not an average loser. You're not a loser at all. Stop it. You've helped Reagan in his sham business. You've made an impact on people's lives. You can't say that. He's like, deep down, you're the same as me. You just don't want to admit that you're nothing without your psychic powers. And he says no, and Mob's like, oh, and I swear that Teru looks like, oh, the one off of Akira, off the movie. Oh God, not the main character, but Tetsu. He looks like his name is Teru, but he looks like Tetsu off of Akira. The animation looks like Akira. That's what it is. Yeah, he's like, the two of us are completely different. Like his just animations on his face, it looks more and more like Akira. It's interesting. And he's like, no, we're the same. from my perspective, you're totally average. Which is so true, because from Mob's perspective, he's a psychic too. So even with the psychic powers, you're average, because you both are psychics. There's nothing special about that. So he's like, even with or without the powers, he's like, you're average. You're just like me. He's like, you're nothing without your powers. And you know what this reminded me of? So, of obligatory Neon Genesis Evangelion spoiler. I'm happy I'm at the point I can make that. But yeah, so Mob is like solved the crisis that Shinji goes through in 26 episodes. Mob realized it in 5, right? Mob's like, man, because in Neon Genesis, the whole thing is that a lot of the conflict that Shinji and Asuka and the other character has is that their EVA units are all that they have. Them being an EVA pilot is all that they can do. It's their sole purpose in life. And without that, they're these empty husks and shells. And it takes the entire series for these characters to realize that. We're only 5 episodes in and Mob's already cracked the code. I was like, okay. That's why I love this episode so much. I was like, oh yeah, this is like the main existential crisis from Neon Genesis, and Mob's already figured it out. So yay! So enough of Neon Genesis spoilers, but I thought that was hilarious. I was like, no, that's basically it. But yeah, and then at this point, Teru just gives up on the psychic powers and he starts choking Mob. And that part's so hard to watch because it's so hard because Teru's like, fine, then if I can't beat you with my psychic powers, I'll beat you just as I am and prove to you that I'm not a loser and I'm not average. And he says that it's Mob's fault. Everything was perfect. And so we see him with his friends, and he used his powers to get a good grade on the test. He used his powers to get everything he wanted, like to score the amazing shot in kickball, to do that, to like boss the other guys around, to get the girls to like him. Like his whole world revolved around his powers. And in one episode, this kid that's the same age as him completely rocked his world and threw him into an existential crisis. Yep. He's like, your existence is a problem. It's ruined my world. It destroyed everything. And he just looks so inhuman. Like, he looks so awful. Like they yassified and made Reagan as sexy as possible in every episode. But Teru, they're like, no, we're not giving him the same treatment. No. And he's like, damn it. And he just looks so awful, trying to get him to use his psychic powers. And that's when Mob's like, I don't want to, because we find out like the plot twist going into Act 2 of this story is that Mob has used his powers on other people before on accident, and it really jarred him, and he doesn't ever want to do it again. That revelation where he's like, I don't want to use them against people, and then the little punch, and Teru almost looks like he's gonna cry at that point, where he's like, that's it? He's like, what the heck was that? Why do you keep rejecting me? And I'm like, dude, he wants you to just back off. He's like, didn't you say you started working out? That means no matter how hard you try, that's all you've got. Oh. And Mob, meanwhile, he keeps like punching him. He's like, people can't change that easily. Just give it up. So, I mean, what Teru does say there is that people cannot change easily. No, they can't. It's really hard. So just because he joined the Body Improvement Club doesn't mean it's going to happen overnight. That part's true. But at the same time, Mob is like, but... Mom's like, that may be true, but I still am trying to like... He's like, I'm still trying. I don't want to use my psychic powers, right? And so from there, he's like, otherwise I'm going to hurt you. I don't want to use my psychic powers. And we see this New Year's Day where these kids, these like bullies, they got onto Ritsu and stole their money, and he tried to get it back. And then they knocked Mob against the wall. And the thing of it is that Mob, as he's about to hit the wall and get knocked out, he sees his brother and gets knocked out. And when he wakes up, they're like on the ground bleeding. Like all of them are bleeding and knocked out. And he sees his own brother and like has the blood on his face. And his brother's like, it hurts. And he's like, I'm going to change. And he sees his brother like with a head injury. And that part was so sad. He's like, I won't use them. And he sees the blood on his hand. I was like, what has this become? This series went from being something that was like nonchalant, like, okay, whatever, to like, oh no, this is something different. And I'm 1,000 times here for it. I'm going to change. And then he sees his brother with the bandage. But then the whole countdown like completely goes out. And it's like we don't know what percent it is. He's not. And this is the part where Ritsu is like, that's not Nissan. That's not Mob. And he's like, Kageyama. And I love how this series, like Tetsu looks so disappointed and sad. And the narrator goes, Kageyama Shigeo and Hanazawa Tetsu. The battle between these two espers never reached its conclusion, except it does. And then I love it's like, as a result of rejecting each other's ideals. Like it's framed like this big shonen battle. There was no victor. And they were only left with a feeling of emptiness deep in their hearts. Or so it seemed. I thought, I was going to be really disappointed if that was the end of it. And I was like, really? We're not going to get any more between these two characters? Really? But that's not where it ends. Or so it seemed. And then I love that he looks around and it's just like all of this stuff coming off of him. He is like, Tetsu, yeah, what is that? And we don't know what this percent is at all, but it's something weird. Did you finally feel like fighting? And he's like, good. In the end, you couldn't stay true to your ideals either. Oh, so whatever this thing is, it might not be Mob, right? Oh, it might not be Mob. So there may be something like inside of Mob that's not weird. And he's like, bring on the... And I love his ultimate barrier. And it just shreds right past him and shreds his clothes completely off. And knocks him back. I love the rock is used to like guard his penis the whole time. It's great. They also do not shy away from... They make... Again, Reagan looks so sexy. And with Teru, he like this little plump body. It's kind of hilarious. He's like, you used them, Kageyama. You couldn't stand anymore and used your psychic powers. Oh, it's crazy. He's like, you use it against another person. But then they're like, is he unconscious? What is this power? Yeah, this is not Mob conscious. It's something else. And it's like some, and I'm sorry, but the psychic power coming, I'm gonna hope that it's coming from Teru's hands. I'm gonna hope that is coming from Teru's hands and not his penis. I'm gonna really hope. I know y'all are like, get your minds out of the gutter, Romania, but I'm sorry, the way that because he's holding himself to like shield himself, and the psychic energy's coming out of, I'm hoping his hands, hoping that we're not suggesting otherwise. He's like, my powers are being sucked from Kageyama and all of the energy in the atmosphere. See, that's a problem. That's a problem. All the energy in the atmosphere, it's like a spirit bomb. I don't like that. I don't like where this is headed. No. Are you telling me his vessel is able to handle this much? Yeah, something's up. I'm like, how do you not know about other psychics, but you know all this? Again, it feels like a trope, like a, kind of like a caveat of a shonen anime where a regular shonen would be like, they know all this stuff, but the main character also simultaneously knows nothing. So I feel like they're making fun of that. Teru sensed there's something in there, something that must never be touched. Yeah, no. And it's like, got this weird child's face. Nope, something incomparable. Its identity unknown. And we get this creepy face, like this baby face. No, I don't like dolls. I don't like creepy faces. I don't like any of that at all. No, thank you. No, thank you. And then the school just rips apart and just floats up. He's like, what in the world did I awaken? Oh my God. I love it. He's like, oh shit. I mean, he's not the first one that awakened it. That's the thing. He's like, that's enough. I'm sorry. And then Teru like flies up. He's like, I won't use my psychic powers against other people again. And they made his butt hairy. They made Teru's butt hairy, which is, why am I not surprised? And then we see like everything floating in this, oh my God, in this atmosphere, like everything's just floating up the tree and then all of them in the middle of the sky. That's great. And he's like, yep. And that's when Teru's like, I guess I am just an average person. So Teru came to an existential realization as well, thanks to Mob. Meanwhile, Mob wakes up and sees everything like being demolished, and it didn't take long for Mob to realize, and the little ticker keeps going up. So Mob slowly coming to the realization he failed to change. He caused another accident because of his psychic powers. And I want to hug him so bad. I'm like, I just want to hug Mob and be like, it's okay, Mob. No, you didn't mean it. You were unconscious. You didn't know what you did. He thinks, so Mob thinks, I feel so bad for him. Because Mob thinks that he hasn't changed. He never changed. And that he's caused another accident. But I'm like, Mob, you didn't know what you were doing, honey. And I'm like, oh, stop. I just want to hug him. And so we got raged last time. And then he didn't know where to direct his emotions. He was overwhelmed. His powerlessness born from contradictions. I love that. I love that he has all the power, but he can't do anything to stop that accident from happening. So his powerless born from contradictions. Oh my God. And so he doesn't know what to do with all the emotion. The feeling that he would never be able to conquer himself. And it just all erupts sadness. Oh, I feel for our being. So we've seen rage, we've seen sadness. So, and then he uses his psychic powers. This was Mob's meager attempt at resistance towards himself. Oh my God. Like him just bringing the school back together. That's such an incredible shot. The animation in this episode's freaking gorgeous. So he put the school back together to try and rectify everything. Yep, everything's back to normal. And he's like, oh. And that's when he sees Teru, who's just naked and bald. He's like, Hanazawa-kun, I'm sorry about your clothes. He's like, wait, Oh, and that's when everybody from the school wakes up and they see Teru and they see the state that he's in and they're like, oh shit, we don't want him to. He was brutally executed. Like, we don't want that to happen to my hair, and they all run away. And he's like, those guys. He's like, you saw it, Kaguya, just as you said. So he thinks they abandoned him. If you take away our psychic powers, but Teru, he tries to be like, we are just both average losers, because he sees that like his whole stuff was stripped away. But just as he's about to say that to Mob, the Body Improvement Club come in. These best bros ever. He's like, oh hey guys, and they're like, are you hurt, Kageyama-kun? They're like, Kageyama, are you hurt? And he's like, no. I love it. He's like, I'm fine. And they say, all right then, good. And you see Mob smile. He's like, okay, good. He's like, we're gonna head back and do more squats. You see him smile. It's like, oh. It's like, oh. And then I love that Teru like has this realization wash over him, and he like smiles like he's all knowing now, like he's been enlightened. There's nothing I can even say. I completely lost. And then just to add like another layer of angst on top of all this, Mob goes looking for Dimple-sama, and he looks at the frog thinking it could be him, and he can't find him. He looked for 3 hours trying to find Dimple-sama. I wonder if there's anything special about the window he passes by. He passes by a girl's window, and so I wondered if it was like Tsubomi's or Mizato's. It seems like it could be Tsubomi's, but he went around searching for 3 hours and couldn't find Dimple. And that's when he goes home, and that's when Ritsu like gives him the towel and checks in on him, being a good brother. I love it. I love that Ritsu's like, hey, it's okay. He's like, here, you're going to catch a cold. And that's when he's like, do you want to eat? And he's like, no. And so what I love about this scene is Ritsu knows. It's so funny because from the outset, you wouldn't think that Mob was acting much different, because Mob seems about the same. But Ritsu instantly knows that something's up. He knows his brother well enough to know when he's upset. And even though he doesn't seem different, he knows something's up. And so he asks him, he's like, is something wrong? And he's like, no, not really. And he's like, well, if you need to like talk to somebody, you know, you can always talk to me. And it's like, He's like, I'll be happy to listen. And then that's when he gets a hold of him. And he's like, do you remember that incident? And now here's the thing. Ritsu lies to him. Ritsu says, he's like, oh, that time you threw up my hoodie? And he's like, no, about the other accident. And he's like, oh, well, no, those guys got hurt. And he's like, I can't really remember what happened with that accident involving my psychic powers. And what did I do to you back then? And Ritsu's like, you. And when he grabs the door handle, I love that, just that subtle animation of him being like, like you just know something's up. And he's like, oh, well, you didn't do anything to me, Nissan. He's like, one of those punks kicked me away and I got hurt. So he lied. He's like, you protected me. Which is kind of a white lie because it's a half-truth. He did protect Ritsu, but it was by annihilating all those others. He's like, you should get over it already. Good night. And Mob, we don't see, that's the thing about Mob's face. You don't really know how he's taking it. You don't really know. He's just like, you don't really know how he's processing it, right? That's the thing. You just kind of have to guess, and he just kind of like, oh, And he just looks at the towel. But then we go to the Ritsu. Someone in the Discord, I think it might have been Kiri, when I said I just met Ritsu, they're like, oh, that edgelord. And I was like, edgelord? Because it was funny, the episode I just watched where we meet Ritsu, it hadn't premiered on Patreon yet. And so when they said he was an edgelord, I was like, he seemed like a cinnamon bun in that episode. No, in this episode, I'm like, yeah. I was like, oh, no. I see what you're saying now, because he's watching the news. And at 5 p.m., they saw a supernatural phenomenon in the stormy skies. And some girl's like, an Ochimusha was flying. Like, this girl's like, yeah. Report. And Ritsu knows. He's like, that's why Mob was bringing it up. And just like that, they show like the stuff flying into the air. We don't know. And he said back then, that's when Mob was knocked out, like against the wall. And he was knocked unconscious. But then, yeah, and Ritsu's crying. But then you see the stuff come away from him, and it's like this monster. The theory was this was man-made is gaining traction. And I love that he's in the dark, and Ritsu's like got the sweat pouring off of him. I love it. And he's like, that wasn't Nissan. Oh my god, I freaking love it. And again, Neon Genesis, this isn't really a spoiler to anything, but in Neon Genesis, there's a lot of focus on overhead lights and the lights above beds. And here we have the same thing with Mob. Him looking above the bed at the light, saying, I have no appetite. And then he caught a cold. Oh my god. I've talked for an hour about this series. I've talked for an hour about this episode. But this was incredible. This is one of my favorite episodes of anything I've watched recently. So that's great. Mob Psycho, right? I love this so much. And I love that what it's setting up with Mob, just the idea, his motivations, why Mob is doing what he's doing, why he doesn't want to use his psyche. It's perfect. This episode is perfect. It really is. There is not a flaw in this episode. You appreciate Dimple, even as annoying he is. He serves a purpose. Teru is amazing. Teru goes through an entire shonen protagonist's storyline within a single episode. He really does. Teru goes through the entire storyline of an entire shonen protagonist, an entire series worth of emotional character development in one episode. He goes through the whole shebang, ends up coming out that like he may become Mob's friend out of just sheer curiosity and fear. But Mob, like, he goes through the motions. Mob, like, we understand his motivations now. We understand the dilemma. We understand there's something else lurking beneath inside of him with that psychic ability. We understand Reagan's connection to him, why he reveres Reagan so much, that Reagan's known him from a young age. We got backstory, we get lore, we get mystery, we get Ritsu set up as being somewhat, like, concerned for his brother and scary. Whatever that's going to lead to. And then we have the Body Improvement Club, and then it was hilarious. The animation was great. This episode was flawless. I have no complaints. None whatsoever. And this was episode 5. Right? Of the first season. Okay. If it's all uphill from here, I'm excited. So, I don't want any spoilers, obviously, but I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. But this episode's just perfection. I loved it so much. So, in the meantime, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. take care. And yeah, I am going to be back here very soon with more Mob Psycho. Bye.